It's time to do some painting, so we're back in 3D Coat and we're going to open the mesh that we saved out from Reality Capture just now. And we got this menu again, and now we got to choose what we want to do. Paint UV mapped mesh per pixel is the one we want. So like that. So we navigate to where we put the file, and it's in exports, textured, and the nanite. There, and we just wait for it to load. We're gonna set the texture width and texture height to 8K and keep UVs is on, and then OK. And it's in. The first thing I want to do is check that the texture's got the right size. So go down to textures, mesh, and texture resolution, and check that it's set to 8K. Sometimes it can be set to lower, even though you set it to 8K, it happens. Or you just forget to set it to 8K when you load it. But it's good, like so. And now we need to import, go to layers here. We need to import some painting layers. So we're gonna find the diffuse from Reality Capture. We're gonna go to import color albedo map. And we're gonna go to the exports folder and import that. We don't need to import the normal map. This one is done. We are finished with the normals. And the paint operations we're going to do is rather simple. So it's mainly about fixing a few things. So here we go. It's in. We got an 8K texture on, and by pressing number 2 on the keyboard, we go to absolute delighted mode, and that's where we're going to be working in. We don't want any shadow casting or anything, so we want to get rid of this underside here. So first I would save the scene. So the first thing we should do is try to delight it as best as we can, because even though it was shot on a cloudy day, you still get ambient occlusion on it, and you can see it's a little bit brighter on the top there than on the rest. So the best way to delight the ambient occlusion is, of course, to create an ambient occlusion map and use that as our basis. So we're going to go here to edit and calculate occlusion. And we're going to choose light sources. We're not going to use a sphere. We're going to use a hemisphere, because we have a ground. When this one was taken, there is a ground that will act like a hemisphere, so we get heavier shadows from the ground and up. And we're going to go with a 1 or a 0.455 ambient occlusion map. It's going to make it a lot darker than the one. The linear one, and this is good because we need a little bit more of a punch to get to be able to light it correctly in the crevices. We will click OK, and this is going to take a little bit of time. The ambient occlusion is done, and you can see how it's darkened down the object. So we're going to make a copy out of this one. Just right click, duplicate, hide the other one. I'm going to unlock this. Okay. Now we're going to right click, and we are going to invert the color. Just flip it. Just a normal inversion here. So now we're going to get rid of the light that's in the crevices here. So we've got to change the blend mode. So it's set to multiply because it's an ambient occlusion, but we want something else. Now you can try a few of these, like screen, linear, dodge. I actually prefer quite often that soft light works best. So I'm going to put it to soft light. You can see it already looks kind of nice and flat, but it's way too much. So I'm going to lower this to 50%. And I think 50% usually is a good starting point. Could be tweaked a little bit. Sometimes it gets a bit too bright in these kind of things. So just a little bit lower. I'm going to go 45. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. So that takes care of a lot of the lighting, and it's a lot more flatter now. Let's see the before and after. See, it's quite a lot more natural. Let's duplicate this one, and we're gonna do a similar thing, but instead we're actually gonna multiply it. So we're gonna bring down the peaks a little bit. The bright areas is gonna be brought down a little bit. So this is 50%, and that's way too much, or 45%, but it's still too much. So this should be quite low. I'd do something like 20 is a good start. As you can see now, they kind of meet in the middle there, but I think 20 might be a bit too much. Let's do 15. And I think that's pretty good. Now it's even flatter. So I kind of like this result, and this should take care of the delighting issues I would have. Now I can, if I want to, I could create some light. If I got the sharper shadows, a light that matches up, and use that in the same way, cast shadows on it and then delight it like that. But it's kind of a little bit tricky and time consuming. I prefer to go over with a brush if I need to darken and lighten things, like a dodge and burn operation over the mesh. It usually just a little kind of simple, not too much, not too heavy-handed, just bring it a little bit more in line. But we'll see if we actually need it for this one. So next step would be to paint out this bottom here. So I'm gonna do a right click here and do a merge visible. Wait for that. Just cleans it up a bit. I find quite often it's a good thing to commit to operations. It's not to everyone's taste, but if you want like endless trees of operations and things, so you always can go back. It's of course how you should work in a professional environment, but I think for your own personal work, it's good to commit and just be better at knowing when it's time to stop and when it's time to commit your work, so you don't overwork and never finish stuff. But here we go. We got a diffuse layer here. Okay, let's paint this out. So you need to find your Smart Materials folder and have it accessible here, and your brushes could be useful as well to have, so you get some paintbrushes to choose from. If you can't find it here on the side, or if you accidentally click it away, you have under Windows panels, you got all the brushes here, so you just click them out and then you can drag them over to the side there. And we want to be in the layers here. Sometimes the 3D coat interface can get a bit messy and they can trip you up, and I do hope they improve that kind of thing. It does it would confuse a lot of people who are not completely into it. Sometimes I still get a little bit perplexed sometimes when things just disappear and you have to put it back in its place. But anyway, let's do some painting here. So it's got 3D Coat's got a very powerful painting engine. It's kind of reminiscent of what you find in Substance Painter, but it's a little bit different. It's got more of an artistic approach to it, not so procedural as Substance Painter is. But here I have already prepared my materials that I want to use for this project. So you do this in your favorite paint application like Photoshop. So you got to do a tiling image map, and it's a very simple one. So let's open one here. So I have let's see, this one. So I have here a texture that I've generated from whatever I took these images with. And it's always a good idea when you're out in the field to think about this step. How can you repair an object? So you need to create these kind of repair textures so you have a chance of doing some seamless repairing. So I've put together a couple of materials here, so I can use this for all my objects that I want to repair. And then it's as simple as you just choose one object, and I have it set to cube mapping. That's triplanar mapping. and just scale it in. We're going to make a new layer for it here, so we paint on something new and just paint it. So let's choose something like that, speed it up a bit. So this would be some kind of a mossy texture here. A bit too bright perhaps, but I have another one for that. This one fits a bit better, to be honest. So here you can scale it up and down the size you want from it. So first, when I do this, I'm just going to put a little bit of a base texture in here. Just to cover up all the worst parts. Before we start painting any further, I'm going to generate a cavity map that will allow me to paint in the crevices and things like that, which is very helpful. So first I got to check what the model looks like when it's lit, and then you can see that I have actually painted on my depth channel. Painted the normal, and this will actually be taken into account when you do certain operations, so I don't want that. Now you can, if you're careful from the beginning, you can use these here where you unclick the depth and just use the albedo to paint on that. But if you haven't done that, I recommend that you go here and put the depth channel to 0% to remove that thing there. And once you've done that, you can now calculate the cavity map. So I did this before, just now, and it looks like this. So you see here, it takes into account whatever I had in that normal map channel, which is good if you're doing that, but we're keeping it simple and it's not what we want, of course, so I'm gonna redo it. And we wait. And here we have the second cavity map, and you can see it looks much better than what I had before. Let me show you the one I did. We got this edge. This is where I painted before, so that's where you get this edge here. Not nice. But now we're working with this, and this is gonna work very good. So I'm going to delete this one. Just click the dustbin here. And then I can hide this one as well. So let's start painting again. Switch into delit mode. And we are going to find another of my maps here. I think this one could be pretty nice. Let's try it like that. And get a bit of an alpha in, so it's not so harsh when I paint it. And yeah, I think this works good. So I'm just gonna get a little bit of this in. So just here on the edges. Now it is luckily that most of this is just me fixing the bottom. So the bottom would 95% of the time would be hidden underground, so I of course have to do a good job of this, making it look kind of seamless, but I'm not gonna overdo it because it's not worth that much time. So first I'm going to do the edges here, just all the way around. Working with a light touch, so I don't use the full opacity all the time. And now we're going to try to use the cavity map. So you get these more on concave, more on convex, less on concave, less on convex. So we are going to try to paint more on convex. Just get this brighter texture a little bit more on the tops here, just to make it blend ever so slightly. Now you shouldn't overdo this either, because it can sometimes create some hard edges there. That's not always what you want, but we got a darker base now, and on the tops we want just a little bit of a brighter texture on it. Something like that. And I think this could be close to being done. Could choose a darker texture here also. Then we can switch this mode to more on concave. Okay, we're going to be happy with this. I think that works just fine. And I'm just going to see if there's any other parts of this model that needs a little bit of a touch-up. I think this looks all good here. Looking good. I think it was as easy as that, and it's now done. All right. So I'm gonna collapse this layer here. And then just show you a few more tools that you have at your disposal here. So you got a very nice clone tool that can be used, and this could be a good candidate here. So you just control click down your point, and then you can use this to just clone in a little bit. It works decent. It's not the world's best, but it gets you out of a couple of situations every now and then. I also have this coloring tool here, so you can darken, lighten, and work with the saturation, which is really good. It's nice to be able to use different saturation, steal the saturation and the colors from the scene and paint it over your hand-painted textures to make them closer to each other. So I'm gonna do a darken. I'm using very low opacities here, but this is how I would paint out if I feel I have some lighting baked in that I don't like. So let's go here, for instance. We can just use always. Just ever so carefully just bring it down a little bit. Maybe feel this one should be a little darker as well. And here you have a few blending modes where you can also use it on more on dark, more on bright. Let's try more on bright only, so we only touch that. Probably is the better way to use this tool. Okay, I would think this one is pretty much done. I'm just gonna repair this a bit. It looks a bit odd, I think. And then we're done. So I'm gonna try the less on concave here, and we see what this one will do. Okay, that's good. We are now done with this. Let's quickly check in shaded mode if there's anything we need to fix. Let's bring the depth opacity down to 0 here. It's always a good idea. See? And now we can save the scene, and we're going to export the textures. There are actually a couple of ways where you can export the textures. So let's do the easy way. We're just going to export the diffuse now. So you got textures and then export, and you can choose color albedo map. We go to 3D Coat, and under Export we'll give this a name. Can already now start with the proper naming for this. So this one will be named like this, and then 8K underscore D for diffuse, and here will be a T underscore for texture. And I'm choosing the EXR, so I get it in get everything over in into Photoshop. If I export here, I got PNGs, but these actually only exports in 8-bit. This is the only one that goes in 32-bit. Now there is other ways where you can export this as well, but this is by far the easiest way, I think. Okay, so I've opened it up in Photoshop now. You can see it comes in a little bit overbright, so we need to adjust for that. So if we go up to image, and we're gonna fiddle with the exposure. So we're gonna adjust the gamma correction here. So we put it down to 4545. And that should be the correct. And then we're gonna convert it to 16-bit and just click it to exposure and gamma. Now you might think that you can adjust the gamma here instead of what I did, but that would be wrong. You get a very different result. So do it like I showed you there. In first adjust the exposure, adjust the gamma, and then just convert it like this down to 16-bit. And then we can save it as a PNG. So this is the 8K texture for the albedo, the diffuse map that we are going to use. We're going to scale it down to 4K and use that. But this would be the master file for the whole thing. And it really is as easy as that. So albedo is done. Normal map we have also done. And now what we need is an ambient occlusion, and we need a roughness. So let's start with the ambient occlusion. So I'm going to go back into 3D Coat and generate another ambient occlusion there. In 3D Coat, you remember I have an ambient occlusion already. If I turn that back on and just do a standard blend, remove the lighting. So you can see it's a little bit too harsh because I used that gamma curve on it, which I don't really want. So I can actually delete this one at this point. And we're going to generate a new one. We're going to use the linear, just one, no gamma curve applied at all. And instead of hemisphere, we're going to use a sphere, because now we want just in the crevices. It's the only place where we want some ambient occlusion. And this is going to take a bit, so I'll be back once it's done. Okay, so the ambient occlusion is finished. Let's look at it here, standard blend. So this one we can use just as it is. I can actually send it over to Photoshop directly. So I have this option here, sync layer with external editors. You can see what that looks like. Leave as is, don't color manage, and here we go, here it is. So it's only an 8-bit as well, but I don't really need much more information in this. So what we're going to do now, we're going to create the ORT texture, the occlusion, roughness, and translucency texture. So in order to do that, I'm going to base it off this one. So I'm going to save this. And I'm just going to save it as ORT. Okay, it's done saving. Now I have a way of creating my roughness. I put them in a few actions here. So let's see what it does if I click this. Here we go. So let's take them one at a time. So what first thing that I do is that I create a black and white layer. Now this is a Photoshop feature that will turn things into a black and white photograph. What it does is that you have the option to tweak the individual channels here if you like to get the results that you need. The yellows can be brightened up so you get exactly the intensities you want on your reflection map. Next thing that happens is you got to invert it, because it's a roughness texture, so white means that there is no reflection at all. So we gotta tweak the levels after that, so we get it to be quite... It's gonna be almost no reflection here at all, so I'm just gonna kill that off a bit and do it something like that. And I find that's a good start. Now what I also like to do is I can get the occlusion layer and I just paste it in here. So we have to invert it and change the blending mode. I choose something like screen or linear dodge. Screen think will work fine here. So what we want to do is want it to be a little bit less reflective in the crevices. So let's see, maybe that's a little bit too lame. Let's go for the linear dodge. That's going to be quite a lot. Yeah, that's got more of an effect. But we want to dial down the opacity a bit so that it doesn't become too crazy. So let's put it somewhere around there. So now it's going to be completely non-reflective in the cracks and that kind of thing. All right, so I'm going to merge this. Now I have my reflection layer, and what I want here is I want to do my ambient occlusion layer. So copy that, go back to your channels here, and we put the occlusion in the red channel. So just paste it over. So now we got roughness in the green, and here we should have translucency. It's not going to be too much here, but we can just put it to black for now. So that's the result we have so far. But we could make a little bit of a translucency channel there as well. So I'm going to open up my diffuse map, and I'm going to use that to extract a translucency map. So how I do that is I'm going to select a color range. So usually it would be if you have some green plants or some algae or something, you would use that. So I'm just going to click on one of the green ones there and click OK. We copy that and go to adjustments, desaturate. Turn it black and white. Just going to fill in there and tweak the levels a bit. Just something like that. It shouldn't be super bright or anything. It's not a very visible map, but it could add a certain effect in Unreal Engine, that you get a little bit of a glowy effect on the algae or the moss. So with that done, I am gonna blur it as well. Gaussian blur set to 2 is good. Zoom in just so we don't get any sharp edges. We want it to be a little bit fluffy like this. Could even blur it more, but I'll keep it like this. And then flatten the image, copy it over. And there it is. Now you got occlusion, roughness, and translucency. So this is what I would use for this kind of object. It varies slightly from object to object. I mean, something like an orm texture is quite preferable, where you replace the translucency for a metallic texture or something like that. I feel I don't really need that many textures to get this to work. Actually, it's pretty much only the roughness that has any big impact. The occlusion, you can use it sometimes. It does have a little bit of an effect, but normally it will be taken care of in the render anyways. So let's save this. And we are now done with the texture. So next step is just organizing it a little bit and bringing it into Unreal Engine. And after that, we are done. Let's clean the project up and export all the textures to a new folder. So I got these in 8K, 16 bits, and we want to convert them to something a bit more manageable. So what I do, I have set up here already where I can convert them to 8-bit. It's just a little action. You could do the same thing. Just mode, go to 8-bit. So I take this one, go from 16 to 8-bit, and then the first one will be scaling it down to 4K. So this is just image size down to 4K, but put them up as actions so things move along a little bit faster. So now it's 4K, and I'm going to save it. See if we can find the path. There we go. So I got a folder here with textures. So you got the 4K here. You just need to change the name from 8K to 4K. All right. Do the same thing with the Ort texture to 8-bit and then to 4K. And I'm going to save that at the same place. Textures 4K and it's a 4K. And also the normal map should be 8-bit. Now Unreal Engine does accept 16, so you could 16 bits, and it does accept 8 bits, 8K textures, but I think it's a little bit overkill. And as long as I keep the masters, I could always publish them in that quality at a later time. I found no difference with the quality whatsoever. It for me that's fine. The high res and you got it in 8-bit is just fine for everything. Most of the detail comes from the nanite sculpted mesh anyways. So let's see. 4K. So this is all we need to do, and I would also scale these down to like 2K and also one for 1K and save them at the same place. It's just good, so we can optimize it a little bit at least. But I'm going to fast forward from that bit, and we are now going to go to Houdini to export the mesh, clean it up and that kind of thing. I'm in Houdini and I'm going to fix the mesh. Put it into position and that kind of thing, erase a few attributes and such. So I prefer to use Houdini because, well, it's my favorite program, and it can do a lot, especially it's good at organizing stuff. So I got all my pieces in here, and right now I'm working on this one here, HXSC. So let's dive in and see what I got here. So the one I exported last time when I did the textures from Reality Capture, that's the one I'm importing here. But you can see it comes in absolutely huge. So we need to fix that, of course. So let's walk down my little node tree here and see what I'm actually doing. So number 2 here, it's I have a reduce node where I could reduce it to 1,000,000 if I wanted to. Sometimes I prefer using the Houdini reduce. It's very nice and accurate, I think. But the first thing that needs to happen is to scale it into approximately the scene. So I found out that the number 0.05 in this case is the correct scale-ish. It needs to be a little bit smaller, but it's very close. So now we're in the ballpark. Next thing we need to do is clean up the attributes. So if I click here, middle click, I can see I got all kinds of attributes here. I got alpha, I got CD, I got rotation, name, material paths and everything. And we only need UVs and normals and points, of course. That's it. The rest can go. So we're going to clean all of that stuff up. So that I'm doing in this node. And you see now we got points and UVs. So you can see here which attributes we are deleting. It's all of these here. By putting an asterisk there, it means I kill it off, all of it. And the vertex attributes, it's only texture UVs that are left there, so that's fine to leave empty. And then here we also got a few and a few. So since we're only using one texture on this, we only need we don't need any texture attributes or material paths or anything like that. So the next thing I like to do sometimes is just smooth it a very tiny bit, especially if I've used the ZBrush decimation master. It sometimes creates these triangles that are kind of overlapping in a way, or they're very close together and doesn't look nice. So by just moving them aside just the tiniest bit can sometimes help with that. So I don't always do it, but I do it sometimes. And then I put the normals back on. And now we've got to rotate it into position. So I change that so we got it nicely resting on the ground. And I'm just going to fix the scale a little bit. It's a little bit too big, so I'm reducing it with 10%. And this node here will be the name that is in the object when you import it to other programs. So now you will have an object that's got points, normals, UVs, and it gets the name from here. So it's very, very clean and efficient. And then I just save it out to a folder in FBX. There are a few things to think about here when you use the FBX exporter. First of all, this one comes in by default export in ASCII format, but you shouldn't do that. Every other program takes binary just as well, and Blender does not read ASCII format actually, so it's better to just don't click it in, just not use it. Then I also like to click this convert units here. So what this does, if I don't have this clicked in, since Houdini is measured in meters, it's gonna turn out when you come back, when you export it to another program that's in centimeters, it's going to be a scale difference of 100, which is crazy. So you have to compensate for that in Unreal Engine when you import it, which we don't want to do. But if I click in this, it's going to pretend that it's the same scale as in Unreal Engine. So that's all fine then. So then I don't have to tweak that in Unreal. And I'm also going to click in compute smoothing groups. It's something that Unreal Engine likes to have. So I'm just doing it for Unreal's sake. And then I save it out and then we import it. I'm now in Unreal Engine and I'm gonna import the assets I just made into the engine here. So I got a few other ones here that I did just recently. I'm gonna make 20 of these and then they're gonna be published in an updated package of first the Roman ruins assets for FBX, and then I have they are eventually going to end up in this package here. But okay, let's take a look at how we get stuff in the correct way. So this is all approved by Epic, this folder structure that I have here. So if you do the same, it will all be fine. So we're going to create a new folder, and it's going to be named Roman Ruins Pieces. Let's see here, Roman Ruins Piece and then HXSC. That's the ending I have. So Roman ruins piece XHC, and then I can check the other ones. I got a materials folder, I got a meshes folder, and I got the texture folder. So I'm going to create that as well. So new folder, materials, another folder, meshes, a new folder, textures. If I expand another one here, you can see that in textures I have 1K, 2K, and 4K, just to be able to optimize the textures a little bit. But let's dive in here into meshes. Now there are two ways you can import your mesh. You can either click the import, or you can actually drag and drop it in. So I'm just going to drag it in, and I will get this dialog here. And now it should all be correct, because when I exported it, I clicked all the buttons that I needed to get it correctly imported. Just make sure it's set to build a nanite. You can do this after the fact as well. But that's it, just import. There it is, and it's looking good so far. So let's bring in the textures as well. So I'm going to create a new folder, name it 4K. And we can do the same thing here. We can drag and drop it in. Select all three of them, just drag them in there. So we can do the others while we're at it. 2K, 1K as well. Can drag it in there. 2K there. And the 1K there. Let's create a material. Easiest way, if you have one from before. I'm just gonna steal this one here. Control C for copy. Go to my materials tab there. Control V. And we double click it to rename it to HXSC. Like so. Double click to open it, and just drag in our materials here. Like so. That should be good enough for that. Can close it down. Just gonna hit save all, so we don't lose anything in case of a crash. We can go to meshes and just get that and it's looking kind of okay. Now, okay, I see I might have missed a 4K there. Let's add that ending here. One thing we need to do is double click on the normal map. You might remember that I said I exported as DirectX or as OpenGL, but we want it in DirectX. So if you go here and click flip, we will flip the green channel, and it should now be okay. And we go to the meshes again, and now we can drag this into the scene. Okay, it's the wrong one. Okay, we can go to the... So one thing you need to do is go to the textures and click flip. Okay, it's done. Just check that the flip green channel is on. Then what we can do is go to the meshes and just drag it in. And there it is. It's looking pretty decent. It does look a tiny bit dark, I think. So I am gonna have to tune the textures a little bit, just bring up the the brightness of this texture a couple of percent, maybe 25% actually, something like that. So let's do that. We can click on this and we can open in external editor. That will be Adobe Photoshop. And adjustments, exposure, bring it up. Let's try one stop like this. And then save it. And just click re-import. Let's see where we're at. It's looking better. Could it be brighter? Oh, it's pretty much in line with the other ones are. But you get the drift. So you can easily, just when you bring it in, you can tweak them here. And then I would have to do the same for the 2K and the 1K. Or I just get the 8K I did before and bring that up one stop and then export these out again. But I think the other ones are looking as they should. Let's check this one. You could, this one comes in as an sRGB. We could unclick this so it's a linear space, which is what they're normally created as. Get it a bit more correct. And that's it. I think we're done here. We got the whole thing from the beginning to the very end. Went through all the steps. And to me, this is it's a great workflow. It's very efficient, creates high quality meshes and the textures, and it's all I need for these kind of simple objects. Now in the future I'm going to show you how to handle something that's a little bit more complex and a little bit more broken, where you have to do a lot more fixes, and that's when a program like 3D Coat comes into play. In this scenario, when you get a simple object like these, you can get by with using something like Blender or something to cut off the textures, cut off the meshes and prepare them. But once it gets really complicated, you're going to need some of my my favorite programs like 3D Coat and Houdini to get all the way through the whole thing. So we dive into that. But this is it for now. It's running long as it is. I think we're clocking in at about 2 hours. So hopefully you stayed with me to the end. And I hope to see you around next time.